The old butler had stood in that dining room for 41 years, and he had never, in all of them, heard a soup tureen set down with such quiet finality. The companion did not slam it. She did not need to. She set it onto the linen, took the cloth napkin from inside her own apron pocket, and bent toward the matriarch to wipe a single drop of broth from the back of the old woman's hand. Then she straightened, and she looked across the long mahogany table at Damiana Caravello, who had just raised her voice at her mother-in-law over a spilled spoon, and she said, plainly and without heat, "Madam, the lady of this house will be spoken to with respect at her own table." The room stopped breathing. Bertram, who had carried plates through every quarrel this family had ever had, felt his own breath catch behind the carving stand. He had not, in 41 years, seen a hired companion correct a member of the family in front of guests. He had not seen anyone correct Damiana at all. The matriarch, Donna Rosalia, the boss's mother, 83 years old, thin as a reed in her good navy dress, her white hair pinned with the small jet comb her late husband had given her, looked up at the young companion with an expression Bertram had not seen on her face for 2 years. Surprise, then something rarer, relief. Damiana did not move. Her wine glass stayed lifted halfway to her mouth. The cousin from the city, who had been telling a story about a yacht, fell silent. The cousin's wife studied her plate. "You," Damiana said at last, very softly, "you forget yourself." "No, madam," said the young companion, "I do not." Her name was Lena Viarbeck. She was 24. She had come to the estate 11 weeks earlier from a small agency in town that placed day companions with elderly clients, a quiet position, low pay, modest uniform gone by 8 in the evening. She had a kind, ordinary face, warm brown eyes, dark hair pinned back in a low bun. The household had hardly registered her. Bertram had registered her because Bertram registered everyone. He had registered in particular that she did not gossip, not with the maids, not with the cook, not with the gardener, and that she read aloud to Donna Rosalia for an hour every afternoon in the sunroom, from a stack of old letters that the matriarch's son had sent home from boarding school decades ago, when he had been 9 and homesick, and not yet the man whose name made strong men go quiet at their own dinners. Bertram had registered, too, that something at the estate had begun to go quietly wrong about a month after Lena arrived. Donna Rosalia, who had always been sharp, had started forgetting names. She slept in the chair by the window for whole afternoons. Her hand trembled at the breakfast cup. The visiting doctor, a soft-spoken man Damiana had recommended 6 months earlier, had said simply that the matriarch was very old and that more rest and a higher dose of the calm drops at night would be best for her. Damiana had agreed. Damiana had agreed with everything the doctor said. Lena had not argued. Lena had simply, every afternoon, walked the matriarch out into the rose garden for 40 minutes, no matter the weather. She had read the old letters aloud. She had brought the matriarch her favorite tea, the one Damiana had quietly removed from the kitchen pantry 6 weeks earlier by bringing a tin of it from her own home, in her own bag. She had begun, 3 weeks ago, to keep the small medicine ledger in the matriarch's bedroom drawer, and to write, in her neat round hand, the precise dose she had counted out from the bottle each evening, beside the dose the doctor had prescribed. Bertram had seen that ledger. He had seen it because Lena had asked him, very quietly, to keep an eye on it when she was off the property. Not to read it, not to discuss it, only to make sure it was not moved. He had agreed without questioning, because he had been raised by his own father, who had been head footman in this house before him, to recognize an honest hand when one was offered. The numbers in the ledger did not match the doctor's prescription. The bottle in the cabinet was being emptied faster than it should have been. Bertram had said nothing. Bertram had waited. And now Lena had set down the tureen, and the room had stopped breathing, and the matriarch was looking at her companion with 2 years' worth of relief in her face, and Damiana's wine glass was still suspended in the air. "Pour the soup, Bertram," Lena said, gently, without taking her eyes off Damiana. "The lady has not eaten since breakfast." Bertram poured the soup. The dinner finished somehow. The cousin from the city did not finish his yacht story. Damiana drank her wine in one long swallow and set the glass down hard enough to chip the rim. The matriarch ate. She ate slowly, with the small, careful spoonfuls of the very old, but she ate. When the plates were cleared, Lena helped her to her feet, gave her her cane, and walked her out of the dining room, one hand at the matriarch's elbow, the other at the small of her back. Donna Rosalia turned in the doorway and looked at her daughter-in-law for a long moment without speaking. Then she let herself be led away. Bertram did not sleep that night. He sat at his small desk in the pantry, the medicine ledger open in front of him, and at 11:30 he heard the courtyard gate open, and the long black car came up the drive without announcement. The boss was home 4 days early. Bertram had known Don Matteo Caravello since the day Matteo had been born in the upstairs bedroom of this house. He had carried him on his shoulder when the boy was 6. He had stood at the back of the church the day Matteo had buried his father at 32. He knew every silence Matteo had. The silence that meant work. The silence that meant grief. The silence that meant something inside the house was wrong. When the boss walked into the foyer at 20 past midnight, in his dark wool overcoat, his short-trimmed beard speckled with rain, his dark eyes finding Bertram's at once, Bertram knew which silence this would be by the time it was over. "You're up late," the boss said. "Yes, sir." "Mother?" "Asleep, sir, resting well." A pause. "Sir, before you retire, there is a matter I should have brought to you a fortnight ago and did not. I will accept any consequence you set on me for the delay." Don Matteo did not take off his coat. He looked at the old man for a long moment, then he said, "The study." In the wood-paneled study Bertram laid the medicine ledger on the wide desk. He did not speak for a long minute. He laid out, beside it, the doctor's written prescription from the bureau drawer in the matriarch's room. He laid out, beside that, a single sheet of paper on which Lena had, 3 nights ago, copied for him the names of the 7 pantry items that had quietly disappeared from Donna Rosalia's daily kitchen orders since spring: the favorite tea, the soft cheese, the lemon biscuits, the small jar of orange blossom honey she put in her milk at night, the 4 other small things an old woman lives by. He told the boss, in the briefest sentences he could manage, what he had seen with his own eyes in 11 weeks. The doses, the pantry, the doctor, the afternoons in the garden when the matriarch had begun, slowly, to come back to herself because a quiet young woman from the agency had refused to let her drift. He told him about the soup tureen. Don Matteo did not interrupt. He did not raise his voice. When Bertram finished, the boss looked at the ledger for a long time, and then he placed his hand flat upon it, as if to keep it from blowing away, and he said only, "Who is the companion?" "Lena Viarbeck, sir, from the Haverston agency, 11 weeks with us, 8 in the morning to 8 at night. Goes home to a small flat above the bakery on Mill Lane." "She did not come to me." "No, sir, she came to me. She asked me to watch the ledger. She did not ask me to act." "Why?" "Because she is not in a position, sir, to be believed over a Caravello. She knew it. She did the only thing she could do. She held the line where she stood." There was a long silence in the study. The rain ticked on the window. Then Don Matteo said, very quietly, "Bring her to my mother's sitting room tomorrow at 9 with my mother, and with the doctor at 1:30. "Yes, sir." "And Bertram." "Sir." "Thank you." It was not a word the boss used. Bertram bowed his head and went to put the ledger away. The sun-room the next morning was full of light. Donna Rosalia sat in her wingback chair by the tall window in her dressing gown and her good wool shawl, her white hair brushed and pinned, her thin hands folded in her lap. Lena stood beside her in her plain gray work dress, her apron freshly tied, her face calm. She had been told only that the boss had come home and wished to see his mother. She had not been told why. The boss came in alone. He crossed the room to his mother and bent and kissed her forehead and held her hand in both of his for a long moment without speaking. Then he straightened, and he turned, and he looked at the young companion for the first time. "Miss Viarbeck." "Yes, sir." "My mother's color is good this morning." "She slept well, sir." You have been walking her in the garden every afternoon. Yes, sir. 40 minutes when the weather allows. You have been bringing her tea from your own kitchen. A pause. Yes, sir. Why? Lena did not look away. Because it makes her happy, sir, and she could not have it here. The boss nodded once. He sat down in the chair across from his mother. He did not invite Lena to sit. He did not need to, he said. At 9:30 the doctor will come into this room. I would like you to stand where you are standing now. I would like you to answer any question I ask you in front of him with the truth. You will not be asked to accuse anyone. You will be asked only what you have done and what you have seen with your own eyes. Yes, sir. Are you afraid? She considered it. A little, sir. Not enough to matter. For the first time in 2 years, Donna Rosalia laughed. A small, papery laugh, but a laugh. She reached out and took Lena's hand and held it. The boss watched their two hands together on the arm of the wingback chair, and Bertram, standing at the door, saw the boss's jaw work once, only once, and then go still again. The doctor arrived at 9:30. Damiana arrived 2 minutes later, uninvited, in a pale silk morning dress, smiling. She stopped smiling when she saw the ledger on the small table beside Don Mateo's chair. What followed in that sunroom was not loud. The boss asked the doctor to read aloud his own written prescription. He asked the doctor to read aloud the doses recorded in Lena's hand. He asked Lena to describe, plainly, how she had counted the drops. He asked Bertram to confirm the pantry items removed from his mother's daily orders. He asked Damiana only why his mother's favorite tea was no longer in the house. Damiana opened her mouth and closed it. She tried the smile again. It did not catch. The boss did not raise his voice. He told the doctor evenly that his services were no longer required at the estate and would not be required at any property of the family from this day forward, and that the medical board would be in receipt by the end of the week of the ledger and the prescription, side by side, for their consideration. He told Damiana evenly that her keys to the matriarch's wing would be returned to Bertram before noon, that her name would be removed from the household management of his mother's affairs, that her place in his mother's will, which she had urged the lawyer to revisit twice in the spring, would be reviewed without her, and that she would be leaving the estate by morning. He did not say what would follow if she did not. He did not need to. Damiana left the sunroom without speaking. The doctor followed her, very pale. When the door had closed, the boss stood up. He went to his mother and knelt by her chair and laid his head, briefly, against her thin shoulder. The matriarch put her hand on her son's dark hair and held it there. Lena, very quietly, took half a step back, because she did not belong to this moment. The boss, without looking up, said, "Stay." Lena stayed. When he rose, he turned to her and he said, "Miss Viarbeck, you will not return to the agency. You will choose, this morning, a room in this house. You will be paid as a member of this family's staff, by this family directly, not by an agency. You will choose your own hours. You will sit with my mother as long as my mother and you both wish, and not 1 minute longer than that. If you wish one day to leave us for a life of your own, you will leave with our blessing and our means. Until then, this is your home." And he paused. "What you did at the table last night, you did for my mother in a room of people who should have done it for her years ago. I will not forget it. None of us will." Lena did not cry. Bertram at the door did, very quietly, into the back of his own white glove. The matriarch lifted Lena's hand to her lips and kissed it, the way an old woman of her generation kissed something precious. "Daughter," she said, very softly. It was the first time she had used that word to anyone in 20 years. Bertram closed the door of the sunroom and stood a moment in the corridor, the medicine ledger under his arm, the morning light coming through the long window onto the marble floor. He had stood in that house for 41 years. He had seen the family take in many people over those years: drivers, cooks, lawyers, wives. He had never, in all of them, seen a young woman walk in through the service door of the matriarch's wing 11 weeks ago carrying nothing but a small bag and her own decency, and walk out of the sunroom at the end of one quiet morning carrying the protection of the most feared man in the country. He would tell it, years later, only once, to his own grandson, who came to him asking how a person knew when to speak and when to keep silent. And Bertram would say only that a person knew by the way the soup tureen was set down. That if it was set down honestly, with the napkin from one's own apron, and one's eyes on the right thing, the rest of the table would, in time, learn what it had forgotten. That decency, plain and unafraid, had a power in a room that even the most feared man in the country could not buy, but could only, in the end, recognize and honor and bring inside his own house. And the matriarch, until the day she died many years later, with Lena's hand in hers and her son's hand on her brow, called the quiet companion who had refused to let her drift simply daughter.